I think we have to start with the Utah Jazz. Unfortunately, this season just continues to spiral out of control. And last night was shocking. A loss in Minnesota, but truly one of the most devastating moments we've seen in a season full of what feels like devastating moments was Joe Ingles going down with what has to be a torn ACL. It was a non contact injury as Joe drove to the basket. And he was in incredible pain. This is one of your leaders. This is one of your glue guys. And Jake, how do they bounce back from this injury?
Yeah, I think the issue with what Joe Ingles brings to this team and what they're going to have to deal with is you look at the culture of this team right now and it's kind of all over the place. You kind of come to understand that this team right now is lacking leadership and they're trying to bring some with guys like Mike Conley and what was Joe Ingles and the leaders on this team, but there's just no other way around it other than to say that they're struggling a little bit, and I don't think it's outlandish to say that. And I think when I look at Joe Ingles, and what he brings to this team, it's a lot. It may not be in the stat sheet, as much as it used to be in prior years. But this is a guy that's been with the team for what 8-9 seasons now. This is a guy that has been, what a lot of people would say an Iron Man, somebody who doesn't miss a lot of games, who plays, who does things the right way. And I just think that when that happened, immediately you knew that as soon as I saw that play, we were watching it. As soon as we saw that, it was like, "Yep, torn ACL. We'll see you later." I mean, it just is so clear that that's what happened, and it's really, really unfortunate for this team. But I think now looking forward, unfortunately, I think the question is, where do you go from here as a basketball team? And this is kind of where Quinn Snyder and that coaching staff and really guys like Donovan Mitchell have to come into play. This team is going to have to figure out what what the goal is from now till the end of the season, because for them to get to the Western Conference Finals or to really get into a good postseason position, they're going to have to do what the 2018 team did, which is you're going to have to win like 18 out of 20 to get into a good playoff matchup and seeding. And I don't know that this team can do that. I think that's a pretty tall order, but we'll see. But that's unfortunately the position that they're in right now.
Yeah, and I think the reality is that basketball is a very physically demanding sport on the body. Then the Jazz have dealt with their fair share of injuries. I mean, you're looking at Rudy Gobert with a calf. Again, an Olympian that has played a lot of minutes.
Hmm.
I am actually not that surprised. I think Donovan Mitchell with this concussion. We're going to talk about Don in a minute because there's a lot of salacious, ridiculous rumors going on.
Hmm.
But I think they've dealt with their fair share of injuries. And oddly enough, the guy that's not been hurt all year is Mike Conley.
Hmm.
And now Mike's not playing exceptional basketball at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But you're missing critical pieces to this team. And I think this is a lost season. I think if you are Danny Ainge and Ryan Smith right now, you have to seriously consider trading every piece on your roster that you can, with the exception of Donovan Mitchell at this trade deadline, Jake, because I don't see any way that you contend for the Western Conference, second round and Western Conference championship, Western Conference finals. I don't see any way you pull that rabbit out of your hat here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way that's even feasible, or even the only like path that you might have to that destination would be just changing the way you play the game, and really starting to utilize the mid range more and kind of changing the dynamic on offense. But that's not who this team has shown to be. I mean, if you think about the guys that are getting the lion's share of minutes, when everything is square and everyone's healthy, I mean, the guys that are getting most minutes are obviously Rudy, Don, Bogey, and Mike Conley. And then that fifth spot tends to be sort of a rotational spot depending on who they're playing. So, when I look at those four guys, again, Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Mike Conley, those four guys have to play better together. And what that looks like, in my opinion, is a lot more ball movement, a lot more unselfish play and utilizing the mid range more. I know it sounds kind of cliche or maybe even borderline cheesy to say that they need to move the ball more when we're talking about basketball. But I look at other teams around the league who are doing better than anybody would have thought. I look at the Cleveland Cavaliers and I watch them play all the time. And they move the ball quite a bit. They utilize Evan Mobley's length against whoever they're playing. They've done it against this Jazz team. So I just think this team in the Jazz and Quinn Snyder need to come up with an offensive game plan that moves the ball more. Get more open looks out of the corner. If you're going to be a 3-ball team, create open looks. That's your only path to any sort of playoff run or whatever the case may be. Now, to your point, I think on the flip side of that, it's really easy if you're Danny Ainge to say, Joe Ingles just basically tore his ACL. It's not confirmed yet, but that's pretty much what that looks like. I'd be shocked if it was anything else. So Joe Ingles has a significant knee injury. Don's out, Rudy's out, and we're left kind of to, metal in the rubble, I guess. And to me, if I'm Danny Ainge, again, like we said last week, this is just accelerating the process for transitioning this team to what it needs to be to win championships. And that to me is what the conversation should be in the front office. What are we doing at the trade deadline to get this ball rolling? Because every single day that we're not making moves to get to who we want to be is another day lost, in my opinion. So I would start the process now.
Yeah, and I think this is that old conversation we always have of, do you know who you are and where you are? And I think if you're the Utah Jazz right now, you have to fully understand that you're not a competitive team. You're not one of the top teams in the NBA. Frankly, I think with the COVID battle that the Jazz have fought over the last 2.5, 3 weeks, if you didn't hear, Quinn Snyder's now in COVID protocols. With all the injuries now that you're facing, you're without arguably your 3 best leadership pieces, good or bad, in Donovan, Rudy Gobert, and now Joe Ingles. I think Rudy Gay has not been the contributor that you had hoped he would be.
Yeah.
I think if you're the Utah Jazz, this season continues to spiral out of control, and I would make significant trades at the deadline if I am able to. It's going to be very difficult. You don't have anything to give in order to get. I think you're going to have to lose, probably 3 trades to remake this roster, and I'd be absolutely fine with that. And again, I'll just say, if you're a Utah Jazz fan and you get upset when Bojan Bogdanovic, when, big names on this roster get traded, I think you don't have perspective. And again, Joe Ingles' leadership is a key part of what you're going to miss.
Yeah.
But let's not forget, this is a guy that is on the far, far backside of his career, who has an expiring contract that has value around the league, and you're not going to be able to leverage that now.
Yeah.
And that to me is a really important piece of this conversation. Joe's leadership, Joe's intangibles, Joe's a great teammate. He's got an expiring contract. Like, all of those things hurt when you're talking about remaking this roster, Jake. And
Yeah.
I just don't. The thing that I struggle with is I don't know how you recover from this injury.
Yeah, I want to play this sound from Mike Conley from last night, because I think it'll give people, if you haven't heard it, it gives a pretty good insight into just how impactful Joe Ingles is. So this is Mike Conley after the game last night. Hello. And no, it won't play.
Mike.
Yeah,
Mike Conley.
Yeah, it won't play. Of course it won't.
God damn it.
Yeah, sorry,
Michael.
it won't play. I don't know why.
Mike.
Obviously,
Hey.
the loss
Hi, Mike.
hurts a lot, but Joe, that took a lot out of guys. Seeing him, tears in his eyes, just you know how much this means to him, and this game means to him, and what we mean to him. So it's like, it's tough, but not everything is supposed to be easy. We understand that. This will build even more character for us. This adversity that we're going through, and you just pray for Joe and hope that it's as minimal as possible.
Yeah, I mean, that's Mike Conley talking about Joe Ingles. I mean, it's deflating. I don't think there's any doubt that it's deflating, and I think you have to look at ways to remake this roster now. Anything other than that is irresponsible, in my opinion. I just think You have to do what you have to do.
Yeah.
For me anyways. I that's just my opinion. Rudy Sanchez says, morning casuals. How were the slopes?
Morning
casuals.
Wow.
You're
Well,
a casual.
Bro.
Yeah, there's the first
Bro.
year of casual. Slopes were amazing as usual.
Yeah, they were pretty good.
Jeremy Bolton says, morning. Edgar Garcia says, best 2 weeks of football I have seen in a very long time. Also, good morning, players.
What's up?
Good morning. Greg Hawkins says, sup, y'all. Brandon Whiteside says, if Jazz season, Brandon Whiteside says, if
Hello.
the Jazz season is a waste, then I feel way worse for LeBum and the Fakers and street clothes. And what do the Lakers have to do with this?
I'm not humoring that. We're not going down that road. It doesn't have anything to do with the Lakers.
Why does bitter ass Jazz fan have to do that?
I get, with all due respect to Brandon Whiteside, because he listens to the show every day. We really appreciate you being here, man. I know you're here every single day, but there are some things that you say that I just can't even humor, and that's one of them. Again, with all due respect, the Lakers have nothing to do with this. Like again, putting another team down because Joe Ingles got hurt and the Jazz are struggling a bit this year. There's just not it just doesn't play here. There's no need for that.
Jeremy Bolton says, was going to say, is this the worst January we've ever seen as a Jazz fan? It's got to be close.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's up there for sure.
Have they won a game this year?
It doesn't feel like it.
Have the Utah Jazz won a game? They're the worst team in the NBA, right?
Never.
They're not. It just feels that way.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, but I think there's some credence to that. I think, with where this team is at, the feeling around the team, not just the win-loss column this month or like the stats and all that, but like the feeling around the team, it just is very like downtrodden and negative right now. And I think that's really tough to deal with. And so when a guy because again, it's fair to say Joe Ingles hasn't exactly been lighting up the stat sheet, right? But that's not what you're really asking him to do on this team. You're asking him to bring guys together, to lead the team a bit. Like, you're asking him to be that guy. So when that particular guy goes down with what was, in my opinion, a gnarly-ass ACL tear, I mean, that is like...
Yeah, that's one of
ugly,
the worst
dude.
kind you can have.
I mean, that is ugly. It's just like, damn, dude, like, what else is this team going to have to absorb before they get over the hump? Brandon Whiteside referenced the Lakers. The Lakers are in a very similar situation. What are they going to have to do to get over the hump? What are the Jazz going to have to do to get over the hump? Like, there's a couple of these teams that are just battling.
I just think you have more assets on other struggling teams than you do with the Jazz.
Yeah,
that's the hardest part is you have a lot more to play with. If you're Sacramento, if you're one of those teams that, is in the playoff right now, you have a lot more assets than the Jazz do to play with.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I just think it's one of those times where you're going to have to bite the bullet on this. You're going to have to...
You're just going to have to trade your major names. I mean, that's unfortunately what this situation is going to require. And I know that that's not easy. I know that doesn't feel good, that means that you're probably going to be a bad team for probably 2 seasons, maybe. I would think it's probably a 2-season
I would think you could
turnaround.
do it the rest of this year and next year, and you could be contending for the playoffs. You'll be a playoff team next year. But I think in 2 years, you're competing for a Western Conference Finals again.
If they start the process at the trade deadline.
Yeah, if you start it now. If you wait, I mean, you're just going to toil. That's the thing. You're either elite in this league or you're just a mediocre team. And I think that Danny Ainge and Ryan Smith are not spending millions of dollars in luxury tax on Mike Conley to toil.
Yeah.
And I think you need to tear this roster down and restart. I mean, it's pretty clear to me that that's what you have to do.
Yeah, and I think it's more pertinent now than it ever has been. I know a lot of times in sports we say, hey, we got to tear the roster down. You burn it to the ground because they suck. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that now with the position that you're in this season, not only with the win-loss column, but Joe Ingles, Don, Root, like all the signs of the season point to let's start the process now rather than trying to go as far as we can this year, then starting. That's what I think the best way to say it.
And the hard part is you really need Donovan Mitchell to grow up. You need Donovan Mitchell to become a superstar right now. And, with his extended absence here, I see no reason to rush him back. I mean, I just don't.
Yeah.
And I think you're not going to do anything to jeopardize his long-term health.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that stands out to me, though, is you've got to correct some mistakes, some significant mistakes. I mean, Mike Conley's a mistake at this point. Rudy Gay has not been what you thought he would be.
Why do you say Mike Conley's a mistake at this point?
Because you can see he's just not the same player this year he was even last year. You can see that, he's a guy, Mike Conley's a guy right now that is very limited because of his age and the deterioration of his skill. And he is, to me, on the defensive end, he just can't compete with most guards anymore.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that he's really falling into that Jazz jackpot of, hey, I'm going to shoot the three. I'm going to work screen and shoot the three. And he isn't getting to the cup as much as you would like. He just isn't the same player that he was. There's not that quick. There's not that explosiveness.
Yeah.
He is a serviceable player. He'd be a great backup point guard. He is no longer a number one point guard on a championship team.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at guys like Bojan Bogdanović, he's got value. I think Jordan Clarkson's got value. Frankly, I'm burned out on Jordan Clarkson right now. He's a guy that I look at when we talk about remaking this roster and should you or could you or what's the right thing to do. What I'm telling you is Jordan Clarkson's committing just egregious turnovers, unforced errors, bad shots, bad decisions, lack of rotations, being not lazy, just unaware on defense. These are all things that Jordan Clarkson is doing that is killing you.
Yeah.
And it is, the turnovers, you gave a team like Minnesota last night so many extra possessions, you were never going to be in position to win that game.
Yeah.
And I think there's just no point in fighting this fight anymore.
Yeah, I agree completely. There's not a lot of incentive to it.
I agree. Aptus Lopez says, what are the realistic trades to remake the roster? And by the way, he's in the Philippines, Manila. Good to see you, Aptus. I don't know that there's a particular trade that you're going to point at.
It's not as easy as that.
I don't know that, and I think philosophically, now that Joe is hurt and you're seeing Donovan's missing a significant amount of time, you got to make a decision here. I mean, you have to ask yourself very clearly, who are we? Because like when I look at where you are in the standings, and I think that this team is still a playoff team. I mean, you are at this point, you're 30-21, you're 9 over.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at where you are, you're quickly falling back to Dallas and Denver very quickly.
How many games back are they of the Jazz?
1 game.
Okay, so you're right there.
You're right there,
literally
which
right there.
then puts you on the cusp of being in the play-in tournament.
Yeah.
And to me, that's where you cannot be. But if you're the Jazz, I'm doing everything I can do to remake this roster regardless of the outcome this year.
Yeah, and I don't think, to answer that question directly, really quick, there is not when I said, hey, it's not that easy about, hey, what trades can they make? It's not that easy because they're not in a position to dictate the trades. They have to get involved as a third team, or like they have to get involved in sort of a secondary role in a trade. And so basically, rather than saying, hey, what are the trades we can make? I would rather verbalize that as how can we offload some of these guys to get asset back? How can we move Bogey to get a trade or to get a draft pick back? That's the process you're going to see this team go through. They're not going to do, hey, Bogey and this young guy for some major player. That I don't see that is.
That just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like I think you need to reacquire draft capital. And you need to be that third team. I mean, you have guys that have limited value. I would move them.
Mm-hmm.
I would do what I can do. James Knight says, heartbroken, guys. He deserved to go out on his terms. Well, you deserve what you've earned.
Yeah.
I mean, and as an NBA player at that's got as many miles as Joe Ingles has, by the way, another Olympian, right? Another Olympian that his body gave out because you cannot continue to play that many minutes without a break. And I look at Joe Ingles, who's in his 30s, and these are the kind of injuries that happen. It's devastating because it's a knee, and at his age, you probably don't recover from that.
Yeah.
And my guess is Joe can go and play in Australia if he wants to.
Mm-hmm.
But my feeling is, as an NBA player, he's probably done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really difficult to overcome that kind of injury at his career, at his point in his career where he is skill-wise.
Yeah.
He's a role player in this league. He's not, Kobe overcoming a knee injury and then an Achilles tear. He's not excuse me, he's not Klay Thompson overcoming like
Durant.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you're not that guy. You never were that guy. The good news is he doesn't require explosiveness to be effective. So you just feel awful for him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
there's
just
no
such a
other way
good
around
human.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeremy Bolton says the answer is obvious for the Jazz: Mike James and Alex Caruso. Well, you'd be far better off if you had those two on your roster.
Yes.
You know. Sean Mierzinski says brutal injury. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, absolutely brutal. Sad day. Definitely my favorite player. And Garcia says. Jeremy Bolton says James Knight, I feel totally the same. So awful. I'm heartbroken for him. Possibly the last time we ever see Joe play. Certainly in a Jazz uniform.
Yeah. I mean, that's a real thing. I mean, you may never see Joe Ingles in the NBA again.
Yeah. Tanner Plummer says you need Donovan Mitchell to grow up. Well, this whole team needs to grow up, in my opinion. We'll see.
But that starts with Donovan.
I mean,
come on.
you don't have a leader on this team. Like, who's the guy on this team? You don't have the guy on this team.
Yeah, there's been a lot of
Who is
videos
that?
of Don on the bench with Jared Butler, like having conversations and teaching him some things, and clipboard Don's been a thing on Twitter, and it's like, yeah, that's great that Don is helping and writing up plays and whatever, dude. I mean, that's all fine and dandy, but what I'm more talking about is, in terms of leadership, is getting the feel of this team back on track, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you feel like, again, I'm not trying to hate, but they feel like a mess. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, this team's together. They're playing the best basketball that they can possibly play with the hand they're being dealt, which they're not. But let's say that they were. And then the Joe Ingles thing happens. And now you're like, okay, well, how is this team going to bounce back? And right now this morning, I don't have an answer for that because I don't know who the leader on the team is. I mean, I know who it should be, and that's Donovan Mitchell. But the relationship between Don and Rudy and then the rest of the locker room needs to be repaired. It needs to be fixed. And so that's why I say, the issue is, even when you do make all these trades and you do get your draft capital back and you do remake this roster, Don and Rudy have to improve that relationship. Don has got to figure out how to not be selfish on the offensive end and take these bombing threes and play basketball, like play NBA basketball. And I know we compare this team to the Suns all the time, but the dynamic between Chris Paul and Devin Booker is why they're winning. Dude, it is why they are winning. Chris Paul is unselfish. He finds Devin Booker. Devin Booker is the same.
He prioritizes finding Devin Booker.
Yeah.
I think the hard part about Donovan Mitchell is that he's turned into a star. He has stopped now his development. And I think this goes back to my doctor versus your doctor last year. The Jazz team physicians were clearly correct.
Mm-hmm.
They did not want him to return when he returned. He returns and instantly re-injures the ankle.
Yep.
Jazz doctors were correct. And that's where I think if there is a fracture in the relationship between Donovan Mitchell and the Utah Jazz, I would point to that moment in time.
Yeah.
Because the Jazz team doctors clearly said, you're not ready to return. And his guys said you are ready to return. And that's where the friction is. I don't know. Is Donovan Mitchell a prima donna? I have no idea. We don't know yet. Is Donovan Mitchell a superstar? I think he is. He's just not a superstar yet. He has to take that next step. And that next step is maturity.
Yeah.
He can score with anybody. There's no doubt about that. He has to improve on defense. And I don't even know at this point that I'd call him a willing defender, but he needs to improve on defense. And he needs to stop this mess. He needs to really, figure it out with Rudy Gobert because there's supposedly a lot of friction. I think Rudy Gobert is another guy that's got to mature quite a bit off the floor. I mean, this griping over getting the ball, you don't deserve the basketball, Rudy. Like, you've done nothing to make Donovan Mitchell throw you the ball. You've shown nothing. You've proven nothing. You're a guy whose best, highest juice offensively is offensive rebounding and putbacks.
Yeah.
That's your job offensively until you show otherwise. So I just think that when you have an injury like Joe Ingles, it brings a lot of ugliness because it's going to continue the train of negativity that's rolling downhill right now.
Yeah.
And the guy who's ultimately responsible for fixing that right now is Danny Ainge. Because the way you fix that is you remake the roster. You make changes and you remake the roster. It is that simple. And Garcia says he'll never be all NBA with no defensive skill or effort. He has defensive skill, Do the Jazz develop guys?
No. Nope.
Ask yourself this question. Do the Jazz develop players from young players to elite top-tier talent? You've done nothing to develop Rudy Gobert's offensive game. I mean, arguably his offensive game from when he was a rook to coming in now is just natural development. Like, yeah, hey, you're figuring some things out. You're figuring out spacing. I mean, the guy, everybody gets all throbbing over, oh, he leads the NBA in field goal percentage because all he does is dunk. He's a 26-foot tall guy. Of course, he's a legit 7-footer. The guy can dunk.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but have the Jazz developed Rudy Gobert? Have the Jazz developed any of their young guys? Did they develop Dante Exum? Is this going to turn into a developmental organization? Because you have a new owner, you have a new general manager, you have new staff coming in. Is Jared Butler ever going to be better than Dante Exum? That's a legitimate question. Think about that.
Yeah.
Dante Exum was a huge mistake. We knew it the moment they drafted him. Is Jared Butler a mistake, or is the mistake that the Jazz won't develop him? Because I don't see Donovan Mitchell developing much outside of Chris Brickley's work. And Chris Brickley has turned Donovan Mitchell into a legitimate, helped him. Don's done a lot of work. Don plays a lot of ball in the summer.
Yeah.
But I look at Elijah Hughes as another perfect example. The Jazz aren't developing Elijah Hughes.
Mm-hmm.
They're not developing Doak. They're not developing the young guys on this roster. Elijah Hughes is another Brickley guy. And what's he do really well? Dribbles and has handles. What does Don do really well? He dribbles, shoots, and has handle. That's what Brickley guys do.
Yeah.
I think there is a missing developmental piece in this organization.
Yeah, and I think it's holding them back from, contending for championships, if we're being honest.
Yeah. Ooh, that hurts, Greg. The Jazz take players with great potential and spin their wheels until they burn out or get traded. New owner, new GM, same result. Take note.
I'm going to say this again.
Oof.
Bitter, party of one.
You can't argue with that. You just can't argue with that. Phoebo the Man 1 says, biggest problem for Utah is Gobert and his insane contract. It's just choking them.
I agree.
I think we say that regularly.
Yep.
Hilton Aptus Lopez says it's time to cut bait with Gobert, albatross of a contract and all. Jeremy Bolton says, seriously, if Gobert wants the ball, and since the season is a waste, have the game plan where for one game you give Rudy what he wants, feed him every time and see what happens. I mean, the best way to develop a guy is create practice habits and give him what you need to in a game.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the conversation across the roster. I mean, again, if you're going to, because it's a mindset thing. It's an edict from the front office to Quinn and the coaching staff and by extension the players. Hey, that we're done with this season. The rest of this season is hey, let's get guys like Jared Butler developing. Let's develop Rudy's game. Let's protect Don from injury. Like that's what if that's what it's going to turn into, then I agree with that. But a lot of people want to reference what Rudy Gobert did in the Olympics, and he was dominating the U.S. early in that game, and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, what did it matter? And that's what I think more than anything with Rudy Gobert. That's what he's got to figure out. His contribution is damn near meaningless to this team on the offensive end, because for him to have success, the Jazz have to shoot really poorly. So even if he has 20 or 25, what does that mean? Well, it means the Jazz shot, 25% from three. So if I'm Rudy Gobert, I'm trying to figure out a way to strengthen my offensive game so I can have more of an impact and have it be a positive impact. That's the difference.
But pugilist? Pugilist says, stop coughing and give away the Xbox already.
Who the fuck are you?
Well, thanks, pugilist. I'll get right on that.
Yeah, can you stop coughing?
I cough because I like to cough. My cough is much better today, by the way.
Good. Yeah, I mean, it is. I agree.
Much, much better.
Yeah.
By the way, we're giving away this Xbox Series X right here. All you have to do is hit subscribe.
I'm going to say this again.
And also, by the way, we have a lot of people. We're down to 2 T-shirts.
Yeah, man. Got to finish out these T-shirts. Isn't our artist back from vacay now?
He is back from vacay today. We're supposed to talk. The new You're a Casual shirt drops. There's the T-shirt. Let me get a close-up of that. There's the T-shirt. We have XL and 2XL left. If you buy a T-shirt, you get 5 entries for every one. You pretty much should do that today because we're at 29. Let me see how many subs we have on this here channel. 2994.
They're definitely real.
2,994 subscribers. When we get to 3,000, we're going to give this away the very next day.
Let's go.
So
Get on it.
please, if you're in Salt Lake City, I'm begging you. We do not wish to ship this to the Philippines, Australia, Belgium. We've picked up, I don't know how. We've picked up some subscribers in Russia. We're big with the vodka drinkers, apparently.